Hello there, and welcome to Radio Free Nintendo episode number 882. This is Greg, temporarily sitting in, you'll be relieved to hear, first host for James. We are recording on the 4th of July, and therefore James has revelry, I can only assume, to partake in. That us... Wait, John, you're entitled to indulge, I would have thought, as much as anyone else. A certain amount of revelry,
I will admit, yes, absolutely. But
so, I very much appreciate the fact that you are here with us to participate in this when I am going to guess there would, for our old favourite concept of opportunity cost, there must have been something better for you to do.
Well, certainly there's always fireworks shows around here. But actually, I think I can probably watch some here from my window, so it's pretty good.
Yeah, multitask, very, very good. But yes, again, I am joined by John and also by Guillaume. Not getting to indulge in the pleasures of the 4th of July so much.
No, not so much. Hello.
Yes, but for now, we will proceed with our usual new business topics until James's revelry ceases, and then he will be joining up with us later on. And we will begin with Guillaume following up on his adventures in that 3-tiered kingdom known as Hyrule.
Yeah, so I kept my word, and last week I said that I probably I was hoping to be done with Tears of the Kingdom by this time next week, which is now. Now is next week. Last week I said that. So anyway, you get it. And yeah, so I finished basically like 90 minutes before 9, which is when we're supposed to start recording, although we never do. I was like, well, maybe now's the time to just head towards the area that I'm told Ganondorf is. And so I started doing that, and it took more than an hour to kind of get to him and then to, beat him. And it was a little bit close. I was eyeing the clock a lot towards the end. It might not surprise anyone to hear that I was over-prepared. Of course, the last boss is nowhere near as tough as some of the optional creatures that you can fight. Not as... I think I have more difficulty against, like, a Lionel than I do against the final boss of this game, or any boss in this game. So it's, I was over-prepared. I had been kind of trying to farm items that I needed to upgrade my best armor, which was an armor that when you have the full set, increases your attack power. And to upgrade it fully, I needed opals. I needed 25 opals for each piece of the set. And so that's 75 opals. That's a whole lot of goddamn opals. And I couldn't find any, I was hanging around Death Mountain and looking at the the mineral, things that you can bust up to get the precious stones inside. And most of the time it wasn't yielding opals. And so eventually, I kind of got tired of doing that. I exhausted most of the side quests that were in that area. And I eventually, after a lot of kind of putting it off, I went in the desert area where most of the side quests that I had started, or that I was aware of, but not done, were located. And what do you know? There's a lot of rock walls in the desert, and this caves that you break them down, you break them up, and they yield opals. So, like an idiot, the one area that I just didn't want to be in was the place that I needed to be in order to get the material that I needed to upgrade my freaking armor. So I ended up doing that, and so I was overpowered against the last boss. I didn't need to do all of that, but the thing is, preparing for fights is not exactly what I play these, Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom for. I just like to, mess around in the world and see what I can discover. And I made a lot of fun little discoveries still, on the lead up to going against the boss. And so that's been fun, like that's the thing. Like, I've seen some people online, I'm not going to name names. I've seen some conversations on the social media about how, Tears of the Kingdom is awful or not fun. That's not my opinion. I just, I don't like every part of Tears of the Kingdom. And, but the parts that I do enjoy, I wouldn't have played for, I've lost count now, maybe 130, 40 hours this game if I didn't enjoy it. I mean, maybe I would have, I've been known to sometimes.
You've been known, Guillaume.
Some games that I hate, but this is not one of them. I feel like when I step away from this game, it's going to be one of those games where I remember the fun times I've had with, and I'm not going to just kind of simmer about it and like in hindsight just hate it more and more and more. Like, I think that it's the good times are what I'm gonna walk away with, basically, and the stuff that was annoying is gonna fade away. I'm not gonna remember it as much. I don't know. Like, how do you sum up thoughts about a 150-hour game that's got so much different stuff in it? Like, it demands of you to do so many different things. I don't even know where to start. But
and
I will
spread
say
out as well, isn't it? Right? A fair amount of that was done relatively close to release, and then obviously now we've got a sort of something of a sprint to the finish. Over a year later, right? Yeah, so. That's tough. I've had a few games of that sort, but probably not so much, funnily enough, where it would be this amount of playtime. I mean, with my experience with Tears of the Kingdom, I finished it relatively quickly after it came out, but it was very much like there was this kind of propulsion, to keep going, to see what was, going to be at the end of it and everything. So, and then even after that, there was some mapping to be done, which I really kind of wanted. I want to see the whole map, especially in the depths and so forth. And then, once that passed, it's not like I've done everything. I mean, that's ridiculous. I think I'd said at the time, like, side quest wise, I was relatively very low percentage, but that kind of, with that impetus gone, it just kind of, faded from my playing, time, and I haven't gone back to it terribly much since. So it's not like it probably couldn't have happened, but it just didn't in my case.
Mm-hmm. I guess the easy thing to do at this point after finishing it, like the way that I can talk about it is that I can nitpick it. So I guess I can start doing that. Like, there's two very obvious things to me that would have improved the game a whole lot. And it's, first of all, like, I wish that you could have like a preset, or a shortcut key, to cycle through some armor sets. Like, just let me cycle through like 4 or 5 sets of armor, like one for fighting, and then, I don't know, one for climbing, one for being sneaky, and one for gliding, maybe? I don't know. But I wish I could.
I think you were talking last week about the desert. It's particularly annoying in part because it enforces changes on you in a way because of the fact that it's too cold at night and it's too hot during the day. And like, my answer to that, I think, was basically to not even use like the prescribed kind of gear for those conditions. But
did you set like a ruby on your weapon to make sure that you're warm and fuzzy at all times?
I preferred my shield. I would have the flame Talos heart. It's fused to my shield, and that would keep me warm at night, and then just flick to a shield that would keep me cool at night, during the day. So I was changing one thing which was like the shield, rather than changing like your whole gear set and all. Because like you said, a lot of the time you want to keep within a set to like get like certain bonuses and stuff. I mean, yeah, obviously, I mean, these games in general, like managing your inventory in, across the board is not very elegant. Some of that just goes all the way back to it supposed to be a Wii U game where you were going to do that on the gamepad and it was going to be convenient, and then that didn't happen. And then, other parts of it feel a bit more just like, discretionary. Like they just, you could change this. And certainly the point about upgrading your gear in general, I remember that being one of my kind of like, this is quite important to, it's one of the main ways, other than the really obvious, like, beating shrines, to upgrade your stamina and health. It's one of the main ways your character gets more powerful. And yet, those quests that, begin the process with finding the fairies are not like probably quite, again, some of it's just the core philosophy of the game is that, we're gonna like, ram as little down your throat as possible, right? It's meant to be open to your agency and so forth, but they probably, could have been emphasized in some way, if not, made mandatory or anything, a little bit more, I think, to stress the importance of them. And then again, also those thresholds for upgrading the gear with some of the more rare elements, the rare particular items like the precious stones and so forth. Probably could, maybe apart from like the absolute uppermost tier of quality of equipment, I think there might have been wise to revise those down a little bit, because it just I think at times it seems so daunting to me. Like, you almost feel like, no, I'm not going to upgrade that thing. Just forget it. You know what I mean? And then, but then you may find you go off and do a bunch of other stuff and you're not even thinking about that. And then you kind of come back to the matter and it's like, oh, well, I've accumulated quite a lot of stuff here. Let's actually see about upgrading some stuff, and you can. But, still, I think that might have, for something that is, I think, remarkably polished in a number of ways, considering the sheer scope of things that you're allowed to do. I do wonder how some of that kind of just survived without the kind of playtesting and the experiences that would have been had, flagging those up as like potential kind of frictions that, the game is partially about frictions, right? You can't get rid of all of those, otherwise it kind of loses its meaning. But that those I think that aren't really worth their cost in that sense, if you like.
Yeah, and like the upgrading of my armor, I did have like a pair of pants in my chosen armor set for combat that I didn't fully upgrade to 4 stars. And ultimately, like as I went through as I made my way to the last boss and then killed the last boss, I realized, and I expected this, that I was overprepared, that I ultimately didn't need to upgrade to 4 stars that set of armor. So, in the game's defense, you can finish the game without doing that. But
since you're there, right? I mean, you've come all that way.
Yeah, I think that mostly, like, it's the freaking Lionels, or like enemies that are tough, that like you use your best weapons against them and they just seem to, they're damage sponges, and I think that they skewed my perspective on what the game would demand out of me, for the last boss. Like there's a Colosseum in the depths where you fight like 5 Lionels in a row, and it's hell. Like it takes forever, and they're all damage sponges, and like I did most of that fight, and then for the last final, the 5th Lionel, I just cheesed it with an arrow that killed it in one shot. But then like when you use that arrow, you don't get the Lionel pieces. Basically, you don't get the Lionel guts or the drops, the horns or whatever. Yeah, that you need to upgrade some of that armor, actually. So, I tried to avoid that for the most part, but I was just it's funny because like people,
that's intended for post endgame though, right?
Probably.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because you don't, like, you can't play after the end game, I don't think, or I haven't tried, but you Basically, there's a place where you can't save anymore. Like, it's a point of no return.
Yeah.
But anyway, like you're saved from before that. You can just load back up and decide, like, well, I'm going to go and do everything I didn't do.
Yep.
But where was I? Anyway, so that's one, I guess, like just having presets for armor that I wish I could have had. But it's true that at some point I did forget that I could just have, like a ruby on my shield. And so I used that trick. I had a weapon that was like a fire rod or something that I didn't use for combat ever because it was kind of useless, but it was useful to have in my hand when I was standing next to an icicle that I needed to to slowly melt down to reveal like a chest behind it or something. And the other thing is that I find that like this game's engine and camera and like everything, like the controls work really well when you're exploring a big vast world or even a big vast underworld, but not so much where you're in a small enclosed space, especially freaking houses. So I hate just the villages in this game, like having to enter every door, talk to the trying to find my way to the inhabitants if there are any, talk to them, like and also with the day and night cycle, sometimes you have to check twice to see if you missed anyone. That's kind of annoying. Like I like my ideal Zelda game, I guess, would just have like the big vast overworld of something like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and then you switch to like like a retro 2D view of something of when you're in a town, or just like entering the house. Like is there any reason really for me to have the ability to cling to the wall and start hopping my way up the wall like in
there's
some
never really much
house.
in Zelda houses, right? There's never really much in them. Most of the time.
No, like there's some, there's some cute touches, like you're in the shelter in is it Gerudo or Gerudo? Gerudo?
Yeah, it's one of those things that you get so used to just reading rather than hearing it said. But I think when it's been said on a few occasions, it's Gerudo, but I'm not certain of that.
I think you're right. So like the Gerudo shelter or whatever, like you see there are living quarters or where the kids are, and they all have like plushy, sand seals. Like there's cute stuff for sure. But yeah, like ultimately, I wish that there was a better system for navigating indoor areas. So yeah, those are the two main nitpicks, I guess. And also, yeah, what you mentioned, Greg, I think the requirements for leveling up your armor could have been revised down, But other than that, like I really enjoyed exploring this world. The depths were so much fun, like just charting like this unknown underground area. Just very, very. It scratched the same itch. I think I've said this last year when I was playing this game the first time, but it scratched the same itch that something like Etrian Odyssey.
Yeah, no, I could see it.
Yeah, and so there's that, and also I did enjoy the puzzles. Like some people might find the Ultra Hand like fiddly and stuff, but I always stopped to help that guy hold up his president's signs. I was always glad to do it, and I was always I don't know, like it was just. I never thought I would ever play a game, let alone a Zelda game, where I would just like string together a bunch of icicles and then like shish kebab a chest out of a locked room or something, bring it to me and then like open that chest. And, like it just like, these are types of puzzles that I've never seen in a Zelda game or in most games before. And so like, I really enjoy that.
And the thing about them is, this was the real engine of my early game experience, was just going shrine to shrine and kind of hit just loads of puzzle shrines, just seemingly, dominating that kind of early going. it's not just that, like, yeah, you're absolutely right. The nature of the puzzles is different oftentimes from what would have been in an old school kind of more linear, iterative dungeon, sequence of puzzles. But it's also that feeling of, like, you might be solving it exactly the way that they generally think people are going to solve it, like the midpoint kind of estimate, if you like, that the developers have, but you don't know. Like, sometimes, like, when you come up with a solution, there's that feeling of, like, is this the way you're meant to do it? And of course, to some extent, that's the whole point. There is, there isn't not necessarily one way that it's meant to be done, but that additional layer of uncertainty of, like, is this what you might previously have considered a sort of valid solution or not, but it could still work. Like, it makes it more interesting to see the outcome. Whereas, obviously, in the past, it would be, I think, dishonest to suggest that you didn't have some of the same sensation of just like, I have an idea, I'm going to try it, let's see if it works. And that, kind of anticipation of that and the satisfaction when you're correct is still there. But I think there's definitely heightened that whole process with this great uncertainty and question about kind of other ways that it could be done. It's just really, that was without question what really got me kind of going on it extremely intensely in the first probably 50 hours or something that I played in the game.
Yeah, I what you're saying just reminds me, like, you would do a shrine, it would kind of open up new ways of thinking about the physics in this game, and I just remember at some point, like, I was always annoyed that, like, basically, like, one of the most versatile ways to get around, especially, well, in the depths, but especially like in the sky, is to have like one of those zonai wings and some fans in the back, and then like just flying around. But it's always been fiddly to, like, it just won't, you need a way to launch it, and like in the sky, there's like plenty of rails that you can just set the wings down on, and, you're going to glide on them, slide on them until you can, you reach the end, and then you're just, gliding. But the way that you can launch from the ground is much more fiddly. And right now, like, I'm thinking, I've never done this, but I realize, like, oh, maybe I could have added, as I gathered more and more pieces, I could have maybe added like a spring under the wing just to launch myself when I use it the first time. Or I maybe like one of those, like that kind of sled with like tiny wheels. Like I could just like put the wings on top of that, and that would be probably the easiest way to do it. But every time, because I don't like to use, I like to use as few of those pieces as possible every time, because I don't want to run out. What I would do is that I would just take a wing, put like 2 or 3 fans on it, and then I would use my ultra hand. I would, first incline it up 45 degrees, move it like as high and as far as I could from me, and then do that backwards as smoothly as I could, like bringing it back down to me. And then I would get on it and use the rewind feature to redo that move backwards to launch myself up so that I could, catch kind of, like the, anyway, like a kind of a way to launch myself so that I could then glide and start, try to get up. Anyway, like, it was like absolutely ridiculous and probably like way more fiddly than it needed to be. But
potentially
I did it
inefficient,
time.
But sometimes those ideas appeal to you. Like,
I just felt like I was, gaming the system or something. I didn't feel bad about doing it. I was just like, haha, I didn't use any extra parts. You won't get me, game. Anyway, it's silly, but I enjoyed it. So yeah, like I great game. I'm glad I'm done with it though. Like maybe I'll go back and finish up some stuff, but I kind of doubt it, because this whole time also I've been thinking about it stopped me from starting some longer games that I wanted to play, and that seems silly to say that because like in the time period when I was not playing this game, I did play through like Chained Echoes, which is like a 70-hour RPG, or at least it took me 70 hours. And I played through Pikmin 4, which was like at least a 30-hour game when you complete everything. So it's not like I didn't beat any big games while I was taking a break from Zelda, but since I started playing it again a little bit like 3-4 weeks ago, I just didn't want to go and start, I don't know, like a Yakuza game or something. So now I'm free to contemplate starting something.
Well, it's just,
big
it's unfinished business, right? I hate having that. I mean, I still have to go back and do that. Starfield is out there. I still have to play the expansion for Cyberpunk. And like, there's just all these like loose ends where I'm like, man, I really just need to go through and like just clean those off the table kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was wondering, I mean, obviously one of these things you can't prove are counterfactual and all that, but I was wondering, do you have any notion of a sense of like the sort of, and I don't know whether I would say it was tremendously important to my play experience anyway, but any sense of whether the sort of payoff of actually, you know, rolling the credits and all that, was it, you know, kind of altered or diminished or enhanced by having it so relatively sort of belated, you know, from some of the experience that you started with, or do you just think it pretty much hit the same way it would have done, you know, however many months ago?
It's hard to say, but I would guess no, because the fact is I didn't care about the story all that much, and so but not back a year ago and not now, and I had kind of a loose, like I didn't mind seeing spoilers as I was playing through it, you know, so I did know a little bit more about what was coming up in the story than I would have otherwise, but and I don't think that diminished my appreciation of it or not, because as we discussed about a year ago, you know, like the way that the story is told doesn't make any sense. It's using the whole kind of non-linear storytelling thing to poor effect. But yeah, like I don't know, like ultimately, like the last boss fight was very impressive, very and kind of fun. You know, like it was not super complicated, but it was like just spectacular and pretty fun to execute. And I think that's probably like the high point of the ending for me. And then like the cutscenes don't work for me. I don't like the way that Zelda speaks in this game. Like I don't know, like the voice acting doesn't really work for me. So yeah, ultimately I wasn't playing it to see the conclusion of the story. So yeah, I don't know. I don't really have more developed thoughts about my appreciation of the ending than that. Like I got to hear some really funky, weird music during while the credits were rolling. That's about it, you know. Like
it's interesting, isn't it? Because like, I mean, I broadly sort of similar territory in terms of the storytelling and all that. You know, not it was all bad, but it didn't feel like it was terribly consequential or kind of a bit an anchor for the experience. But of course, with some games, leaving the storytelling out of it, the kind of end game, whatever you want to say, it is the culmination of the game in a game design sense, right? Like they leave the story out of it or your presentation or whatever. But of course, I suppose the thing about this type of Zelda game is that there isn't that kind of linear, journey of like, okay, we know you've done this, that, and the other quite so much. I mean, again, you've still got the kind of regional phenomena, and all that. We kind of talked about that. You talked about that last week, kind of, those major kind of quests to do that it's generally going to expect players who are going to the end game to have done. But yeah, that's it doesn't necessarily like heavily, as I recall anyway, like heavily leverage that sometimes, certain probably, other Zelda games or games in general might have like, okay, this is the culmination of like absolutely everything that's been in the game to this point, and it's kind of testing you on, whether you've really, been kind of mastering all these things to this point, because there is still that sort of feeling of being able to do it a bunch of different ways, even with something like a last boss, because it could be that you've got like really good gear. It could be that you've got a bunch of like the potions and stuff ready, like that combat the kind of damage you get when it's gloom related and you basically like lose the hearts for a while or whatever. Like, well, if you've got lots of the gloom combat and stuff, well, that can make the boss easier. Or it could just be, you get good at the kind of countering, the flurry rush or whatever, and you can kind of beat it that way. It doesn't. They definitely, there's spectacle there, but from a game design point of view, because of that very sort of strict ethos of like, this is a non-linear game and this is a multiple solution kind of philosophy game. So you don't quite get that same sort of thing that you get in certain games where it's like, yes, this is, really everything that the game was leading up to. But, I can think of previous Zelda games where that wasn't always like an amazing thing. Like, it's just, oh yeah, remember these bosses you fought before? Just kill them again for a bit and then come back.
Right.
There's sometimes when you try and do that, or you think you need to, it's not great for the player either. So I think, there's some rough with the smooth on that.
Yeah. Yeah, so very quickly, in addition to finishing Tears of the Kingdom, I did get this game, PowerSlave Exhumed, which is like a port by Night Dive Studios, a first-person shooter from the Saturn/PlayStation era. It was also on PC, but I think it first came out on Saturn or something. And this is a game I had my eye on for a while, and for some reason I became very, very stubborn about not paying full price for it. I apologize to Night Dive Studios, I suppose, but it came out, I think in late 2022 on the Switch and everything, and it never was on sale. Never, ever, not on Switch anyway. On Xbox, at some point, there was a brief sale, and I told myself, and it was not on sale at the same time on Switch, and I told myself, no, I want to play this on the Switch. I want to be able to play this portably and or have motion controls to play it. So I skipped it, and then for 8 to 12 more months, I had to wait until finally this game, 50% off on Switch. I think it's still going on by the time you're reading this, so this is your shot.
I think I did see that they were having a sale on quite a lot of their, ports, remasters and so forth, because we talked about this with Turok coming to the expansion pack for the NSO, didn't we, in terms of, I would say, I don't know if it's on sale right now, but it has been in the past, and now it is, when I said it wasn't on sale, but probably days later, it did go on sale. I think it's something about under £5 on the UK shop at the moment.
Yeah, it's like $7 Canadian right now, and I'm considering it because I did try to play Turok on the NSO, and I don't think I can do it. Like, the controls are just so foreign to me, and I tried the console level. You can go and set up like a alternate control scheme. So what helps a little bit is switching the left and right sticks. But it's very awkward the way that you do this. You have to go and set the right stick, like you click something, like set it as the left stick, and then you have to go on the right, or vice versa, the left controller, and like set the left stick as the right stick. It's very cumbersome, and it doesn't quite fix everything about Turok. Like the aiming up and down is very, very, very sensitive, and so I find myself because I think it must have been set to the C and the C buttons, the up and down buttons. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to remember. Yeah, because I think that was like the default. The thing about Turok, I don't think it's got as many options as GoldenEye had to kind of work with. Right, like
it's got none.
GoldenEye originally had quite a lot of options, included some weird stuff like use 2 N64 controllers for analogs, dual analog essentially. Turok didn't have as many, and I think the default was that it expected you to move with the C buttons, or possibly with the D-pad if you wanted to have your hands that way round, but obviously most people didn't. And then, you would aim with the stick, which was kind of the flip of what GoldenEye had by default, but then GoldenEye did have a lot of other options if you wanted to use them. So yeah, I can imagine Turok, if you're just booting up that NSO app and you haven't done any like prep for it or whatever, it's probably even more baffling to try and sort of get your head round, or to get on with at first. But of course, with these night dive ports, the default is gonna be probably perfectly easy to get on with, and then they'll have a bunch of options for calibration and the gyro aiming and all this kind of stuff. So I mean, it really, if you have got an interest, and now that it is on sale, that's you've got to pay for it, obviously, but it does seem like the way to go.
Yeah. So PowerSlave Exhumed, the reason why I was interested in it is that the way that people who played it, talked about it, were basically describing it as Metroid before Metroid Prime was a thing, like kind of a first-person exploratory non-linear game. It is that to an extent, but it's got some pretty big differences, of course. So from what I've played so far, the game is divided in discrete levels, but those levels have several possible exits, and they've got areas that you can't reach until you get certain power-ups. The only power-ups I got so far is the improved jump. So that allowed me to, once I got it, go back to a previous level and reach a different exit so that I could, get to yet another different stage. So I guess the progression is going to be that way. There are also this game's equivalent of artifacts, I suppose. It seems like I have to collect a few doodads that don't increase my powers, but you just need them if you want to finish the game. So yeah, it's interesting. I think that maybe one of the improvements that this game has brought, I don't know. It would make sense if that was an improvement, although maybe the original game was that way as well. But like when you reach an exit, it tells you, do you want to go to level name? And when you click yes, it doesn't bring you to that level. It brings you to the world map where you're free to start that level or go to a different one. So I kind of wonder if the original release was not a little bit more strict, and you need to get to the right exit of the stage if you want to make your way to the correct, the level that you actually want to get to. But if not, then fine. But if it is kind of a new thing for this release, good. I'm happy that they did that. I'm not sure what the story is. You're like, at some point some pharaoh head was speaking to me from like a sarcophagus, like floating above its sarcophagus, and was telling me stuff, but I didn't find any option to enable subtitles, and I couldn't understand a word. Like I would have had like to crank up the volume too high in the late in the evening when Karen was trying to sleep. So I basically missed all the instructions that he was giving me, but I assume it has to do with collecting doodads.
Mm-hmm. And you're kind of like a space marine, right? Kind of.
I don't think so. I have no idea. I think that on the cover or like the art, you're some sort of warrior, but like you've got a knife. Like you're not some space marine.
Yeah.
It is set in like, vaguely Egyptian setting. So like that's one of the things that I really, really enjoy. I mentioned that each stage has different exits. Those exits are camels waiting for you at the end of like various hallways, and so you get close to them, and then you get the message you want to exit the level, and so they take you to the next stage. So that's pretty cute. I would say so. In terms of gameplay, the game is very fast. Like it feels like a Doom clone, So I'm pretty happy about that. Like you're just like zipping through the levels. You've got basically like a jump button assigned to the left trigger and shooting on the right trigger, and that's basically all you need. You've got also you can quickly cycle through your weapons with LNR. That's about all you need. So it plays well that way. So I wanted to play it on Switch for motion controls. I appreciate that the motion controls are there, but ultimately this game doesn't need it because it is from that Doom clone mentality where like you just have to aim in the general direction of the enemies. You don't actually need to point like a reticle directly at an enemy, much less get headshots. The bullets will go where they need to go. Like the game does the thing it needs to do for me, which is just like, okay, I see that I'm shooting, my aim is not good because I see like the bullet impacts next to the enemy. Let me just adjust it a little bit, and there we go. Like it's locked in, and I'm now shooting at the enemy, and all is good. So yeah, the motion controls not that essential, but I'm glad I have them. And like there are a few things that I'm wondering if they're going to get more annoying as I keep playing. There's the fact that these levels have doors that need keys. This is very much the design ethos of that era for first-person shooters. Like they're mazes. These levels are mazes, and they have locked doors, and you need the keys. And unfortunately, when you exit the level, and then you go back to it with your newfound powers, you still need to go get that key for that door. It didn't remain unlocked. So I kind of wish, it's probably going to be easier to go get the key back because you're now like more mobile. You've got more options to get through a level, and you've got better weapons. But also, like usually you come back and the levels, the enemies have leveled up a little bit as well. You're facing tougher enemies, so it's not like it's not a piece of cake. You're not Samus fully powered, just literally running through the enemies, exploding them instantly. So we'll see. Like I need to play a whole lot more of it before I can talk more about it. I will say that if you get this game, like it's more for the curiosity of like the playing a game that attempted to do what it's doing so much earlier than Metroid Prime, came out. And if you enjoy kind of the more like the exploration aspect of first person shooters, in terms of like the combat, as I said, like it's very much kind of almost automatic, with the auto aim, but also the enemies so far are not very interesting. They're very small sprites. You barely see them, and mostly it's been like these like jumping spiders and these scarabs and some birds also. They're all very small on your screen, and they're not they're no cacodemon, they're no like they're not that interesting ultimately so far. Also like some what do you call them, dogmen, like Anubises, I don't know, like some so they shoot fireballs at you. Again, like you just strafe left and right while shooting at them, and you take care of them very quickly. So Yeah, we'll see. But so far, I'm happy that finally got a 50% off this game. I could start it and play it and finally see it for myself, and I'm enjoying it so far. Like at least probably as much as I enjoyed playing through Doom and Doom 2 sometime last year. Or maybe 2 years ago? I don't remember at this point. But,
yeah, I mean, I have to say, going through Doom and Doom 2, one of the most enjoyable things about those games is how fast you move. And so the idea of, moving that quickly and having that similar sort of combat where, it's not about really precise aiming, because I think was at least the original Doom didn't really have like a proper y-axis or whatever. Like it was all flat, really. So obviously it wasn't going to be judging where you were shooting along that sort of axis. I think marrying that with more of an emphasis, obviously with some emphasis on exploration because of getting those keys and the maze-like aspect that you mentioned to the kind of the Doom clone kind of paradigm, the level design. But marrying that to something that even brings retraversal into play, like it seems like it's, could be interesting because, for all the wonderful things that I think Metroid Prime does, well, it's quite plodding. You don't get around very fast like that. That is, and which is, not just at odds with, Doom, but it's at odds with 2D Metroid, especially like its contemporaries, like the Fusion and Zero Mission in particular. It's something I've considered playing this one because just kind of seeing what they did with it. I can remember, I think Turok 2 had some light retraversal elements as well, where like you opened up some paths or something like, by virtue of getting certain kind of doodads again. Wasn't really like that sort of core character abilities or anything. It was just kind of like, oh, now there's a path you could kind of walk up and get other doodads or whatever. But Turok 2 was not, the character movement wasn't as fast paced. I don't know how well suited that really was to retraversal relatively. So, I think this is probably quite a particular example of like, kind of, so you get towards the, the kind of, where first person game design starts to change a little bit. So it's almost caught between two worlds, the earliest kind of, first person shooter kind of examples like Doom, and then where the design took it, which was in a number of different places, because it could be more cinematic or it could be more exploratory in the case of like Metroid. So an interesting case there. But, James, shall we introduce you?
Yeah, I'm actually recording.
And so, our international nightmare is over. Mr. Jones has joined us from the end of his Independence Day revelry, as was...
Oh, it's not the end. I've got a beer right here. We're still going.
I spoke too soon, certainly.
I have to celebrate freedom every hour I have.
He has an
remaining.
M80 in his hand right now.
I a hand, please, John. I had an M80 and I had a hand. They're now both in the past tense.
So what's the quintessential beer of the 4th of July, like an American beer? I'm guessing it's not Corona or Molson.
It's a Czech beer.
I see. The Great Melting Pot.
Budweiser, I guess, would probably be the quintessential American beer, I guess.
I can't see Dennis Hopper in Blue Velvet approving of this choice.
Yeah.
Well, it was what was in my fridge. The reality of the situation is Anheuser-Busch was founded by Germans. They shouldn't count. Like you've got to go tap the Rockies or whatever. And look, I don't keep Coors just hanging around in my house, even though it's the banquet beer. Not to disparage Coors, they built a lovely baseball stadium. And I assume they produce a beer that is drinkable. Outside of the confines of music festival you didn't want to go to, but you were dragged to by someone who alleges to love you. So
are we saying is it going to be Pabst Blue Ribbon? Is that going to be the quintessential American beer?
Oh, dear God. Do you think I'm still in college, John? I have a job. I can afford to spend money.
I'm just saying, you're kind of dismissing all of these other beers,
I dismissed Anheuser-Busch as saying it's not quintessentially American. They were Germans.
I don't know. PBR is probably by the day is getting to be more the quintessential American beer. But I digress.
Adolphus Busch.
Yeah.
It's Czech. What can I say? It's very good. It's very good. It's low alcohol, which is it's important because I have to issue an apology for last week. I actually listened to last week's episode, and besides the bad audio quality, which is what it is, I was also really off my game. As I had mentioned, I had been in an accident, and I was on opioids at that particular moment in time, and it is much more apparent in the episode than I thought it was. So
I didn't notice anything.
No, I didn't notice a thing, James.
I was very taking thoughts and then just stopping and going what was I going to say about that? I was also in a lot of fucking pain because it had only been 31 hours since the accident.
And clearly the only way to ease that pain was to talk about the seminal Whoopi Goldberg movie.
To be fair, Theodore Rex is almost certainly
James,
not a consequence of that.
I watched Theodore Rex over the weekend.
So John did watch Theodore Rex. That my new business was going to be interviewing John about Theodore Rex.
Ask me anything, as they say.
What? How did you consume it?
YouTube. You can't get it anywhere else.
Okay.
I wasn't going to buy the DVD.
Not really,
because I have no use for DVDs at this point.
But what if you could get the Blu-ray? Which there's no Blu-ray.
That's
copy.
The thing.
This
movie has been pretty much disavowed by the industry, pretty much.
Yeah.
For good reason.
And the thing is, there's no DVD rental places in my area at all. They don't exist anymore. They're all gone.
No. I mean, in fact, Redbox just recently declared bankruptcy.
I checked. It's not on Redbox.
What? Shocked. I'm shocked. Also, I heard who owned Redbox, and I remember being very confused. It's the Chicken Soup for the Soul publisher. What the fuck? So did you? How would you compare this to the Mario movie?
The original Mario movie, you mean?
Not the the original. One.
It's hard to say because I haven't seen the original Mario movie in a very long time. But I can't gauge. I may have to go back and watch it to give you that comparison.
I don't encourage that.
I mean, I've watched Theodore Rex.
We watched it collectively in 2020.
There's no bar here.
Yes. No. I think they both come from this weird place of mid to early 90s where it's just it's not the 80s cocaine rush because that was in the 80s. There's this weird period where B movies got really experimental and weird and any idea that sort of riffed off a thing that people knew about. So this movie doesn't happen if Jurassic Park doesn't happen, I would assume.
Right.
Or
if the Dinosaurs TV sitcom didn't happen either.
But there's
and didn't also get canceled, so they were available.
To me, this kind of falls into a sort of that kind of a Dick Tracy, Cool as Ice, MTV kind of weird,
Cool
weird
as Ice
sets.
Is its own
I
thing.
know, but it's just all of that weird. I'm watching this and I'm just okay. Well, first off, this movie actually had a budget. I mean, of course, it was the most expensive movie ever to go direct to video. Had a budget of about $33 million at that time, which was crazy.
Good Lord.
Yeah. So that's the thing.
If you watch it, it looks expensive.
It looks expensive. You're looking at some of the sets, and these are all custom-made sets. It's not done it's obviously done on a sound stage, with a lot with custom-built vehicles. There's a bunch of stuff.
Costumes.
Apparently the animatronics. One of the reasons why they canceled the original Dinosaurs series. Yeah, was because the animatronics were very expensive to make and maintain.
Yes.
So,
and that show did pretty well, and they still canceled it. And it was a merch machine.
Yeah. So,
and it was Disney. So it's not like Disney doesn't have the means to maintain animatronics, but even they were we're out.
So
they let's put it this way: they put out an album for that TV show. It was doing well, and I know that because I had it as a 4-year-old on audio cassette.
I'm just gonna skip back. I'm just gonna skip that entirely and pretend I never heard that. But
I was 4. I didn't get the content was delivered to me.
But I mean, this movie, I mean, you watch it, I feel it also made me think about Hollywood on the whole. I feel like there is maybe, I feel like maybe there is.
You're saying Theodore Rex, it makes you think.
I think that there is a certain amount of money that you can throw at a movie to make it so that it's production level, and I think this also applies to video games, where its production quality is of a certain level where it is only mediocre. Like you can't say it's truly terrible because it still seems like a professional production.
There's a floor that you can buy your way to.
I totally agree. Yes,
but there is a ceiling at which point money is no longer the deciding factor.
And this is that. This is, man, there are some scenes in this movie.
they found that floor.
There are some scenes in this movie where it's like its plot is very typical kind of, hokey sort of like, oh no, they kidnapped Jimmy, we have to get him back from the bad guys. That kind of stuff, right?
Yes.
Very much like my thought was that this movie probably should have been either a cartoon or like a kids' TV show. That's really what it should have been. It shouldn't have been a movie. But
like then when they've gotten to do Whoopi Goldberg learning to not be racist.
Well, there's that, but also just,
which is a B plot of this movie,
kind of
by
like,
the way.
Sort of like, it's these dinosaurs fighting to be accepted like real people. Like you can't be a detective, you're a T-Rex, and he's like, T-Rex are people too, kind of thing. So there's like that kind of undercurrent, but also just really weird scenes where there's the one scene where they go to a bar.
T-Rexes are people.
Well, that's completely what it is. And there's this one scene where they're trying to investigate the crime. This other dinosaur has gotten murdered, and they're trying to Whoopi Goldberg and Teddy Rex are trying to find out who murdered this dinosaur. So one of the bad guys says, okay, well, I'm going to pair these two up so that, they're, Teddy Rex is a bumbling fool, so he's just going to screw up the entire investigation, right? But while investigating this, they go to a bar that is a dinosaur bar. And
yes, this is my favorite scene, by the way.
It's about 10 minutes long, and it is the weirdest scene because you have Whoopi Goldberg. It's very much a fish out of water scene where Whoopi Goldberg is surrounded by all of these dinosaurs that are doing normal stuff that you would see in a human bar. They are hitting on people. They are dancing. There's a DJ, and there's like all of...
Which, if you think about the animatronics, that seems super expensive.
And there's probably 10 to 15 of those creatures in here, right? So this was probably kind of seen as a centerpiece of the movie. But the weirdest thing about it is that you have Whoopi Goldberg walking around physically walking around with these animatronic creatures that occupy physical space. And she just seems so weirded out by it. And she's trying to act like she's weirded out, but when you watch it, you're watching it and you're saying to yourself, she's really weirded out and wondering what the hell is going on and what she's doing here. It's very...
Why did I sign up for this movie?
Why did I sign up for this movie? What am I doing here? And there's a couple of scenes there where she's just laughing at some of these creatures, people that come up to, these creatures that come up to hit on her at the bar or something, because apparently there's, dinosaurs that like the soft-skinned people. So, but yes, and so...
it's so good.
But you get the idea that she is just almost laughing at what's going on around her on this movie set. Not even.
Oh yeah.
It's crazy.
Did you make it to the outtakes in the credits?
No. The one on YouTube doesn't have that in the credits.
Okay, so the credits, there's a sequence in the credits where I think it just plays outtake clips, and almost all of it is just her laughing at the scene happening in front of her.
It's so, it's just, the whole thing is just so preposterous, but also just some unnecessary stuff in there, I mean, just things where, T-Rex taps somebody on the shoulder with his tail, and there's a sound effect like boy, And you're like, why? Like, and that's not like a theme that only happens a couple of times in the movie, such that you would think that they would keep doing it if they wanted it to be that wacky. But it's just wacky for like those two couple of times that he does that, and then they never do that again. And you're like, that's really weird. That feels out of place. Because it's kind of trying to be a serious movie, but at times it seems like it's almost like a kid's gag show or something, you know, like a gag reel kind of thing. But then James, the one thing too is so Whoopi Goldberg, I guess she has a son in that movie. I guess they never really go into that much, but I guess I don't know. But anyways, he gets kidnapped, and so the bad guys, they throw him in this cell, this kind of underground cell sort of thing, and he looks across the cell, and there's a chimpanzee there. Why? I don't know.
Because it was cheaper than another animatronic.
Well, and I'm sitting there watching this, and I'm like, what's with the monkey? The monkey has no place here. Why is there a monkey in this scene?
Oh, dinosaurs are fine, but monkeys, get the fuck out of my movie.
But it's just so weird. It's so out of place. It's completely random. But then what's even better is at the end of the movie when they rescue him, he comes out.
Well, yeah, you got to rescue the monkey.
He comes out, and he's holding the monkey in his arms. And he says to Whoopi Goldberg, "Hey, Mom, can I?" And she's like, "Oh, looks like you made a friend." And he's like, "Yeah, hey, can I keep him?" And she's like, "Sure, why not?" That's it. The last time you ever see the monkey again. Why? Like, I didn't get it. I'm like, what's... Like, I thought about this. It lives rent-free in my head. Why is the monkey there? It's so random that it's inserted.
Why is it? Episode, whatever this is, why is the monkey there?
I don't know. It's just
don't
like
forget the Super Mario Brothers movie had to crowbar chimps in as well with the whole sort of devolution gun concept, where the sort of unscrupulous developer guy or whatever gets hit with the gun and turns into a chimp. So it was a proven formula.
Did Dunstan Checks In do better than I thought it did?
It was a proven formula. They were just they would just go where the money was back then. Apparently.
Well, I mean, there's like a vaguely a thing where like the bad guy is trying to like blow up most of the Earth so that he can start over, and he has an arc, and there's this whole thing where he's just trying to like start over the world clean and in his own image and stuff like that. So I can see maybe this monkey was around, like whatever, but why this monkey is in jail, I don't know. It's a chimpanzee.
He knows what he did.
I don't know. I've thought about this quite a bit, and I have nothing. So
two words, the old sequel hook, but I guess sadly it wasn't to be.
No, but I mean, I feel like this movie. Ironically, I feel like this movie actually could be decent today if they made a sequel to it because of what they can do in CGI.
You really?
But, I mean, how many movies are out there with live action people playing with CGI animals? They're all over the place. Right? Like, this is common. What I'm saying is Theodore Rex was actually about 30 years ahead of its time. That's what I'm saying.
I actually think the movie being animatronic, like, this comes up with Star Wars films, where in episodes 1, 2, and 3, a lot of the characters are CG. Yeah. And they always feel off when they're in scenes.
It's not actually that many in one. It's not as many in one. They've got a lot of, there's a lot of puppets and miniatures and stuff. They kind of oversold how much they were, but equally, it was a lot relative to the time. And then, when you get to the later ones, they're very digital.
But then they wound that, like, one thing I actually like about the sequel trilogy is they wound that back and were much more the sets can be CG, whatever, but the people in the scene need to be interacting with people in the space, because you can kind of tell. Like, you can kind of tell when someone's interacting with something that's physically
it's something
present.
that they still struggle with now. And I mean, so if you're doing that 20 odd years ago, they really struggle, especially with things that were tremendously ill-conceived, like the clone troopers without helmets on. Like, it's just like that was way too difficult to have a digital clone trooper with a photographed Tamura Morrison like head sellotaped on top. It's just a terrible choice. It was never going to look good, but it probably wouldn't look good now. But it definitely wasn't going to look good back then.
Yeah, and so like in those movies, they very much. Like, yeah, we'll have somebody build the big expensive costume and be in it.
Just fabricate some stormtrooper costumes. Like, we'll actually do that. Yeah, and
actors react more naturally because they're not interacting with a set of eyes floating on a green stick. Like there's a physical presence. So I actually think doing this with anthropomorphized dinosaur robots is actually important to the whole
point
verb
is, if they made a sequel, it would be worse, not better. Very important point there.
I just want them to make rather than a sequel, like an FX streaming series, like 5 episodes. Because it's streaming, it can be whatever run length that episode demands. So like one might be 42 minutes long, one might be an hour 5, one might be the finale might be 2 hours. Like
whatever the narrative demands, story, isn't it? Yes.
Right. Yeah. Ultimate flexibility. And that, I mean, yeah, people are going to call it Emmy bait, but so what? Sometimes you got to produce Emmy bait. You've got to put yourself on the market.
You've got to be in it to
win
it.
That's right. Like, look, they're probably going to walk away with the million Emmys already with Shogun, and they released that early in the year. Well, that sets them up for Theodore Rex's Clean House next. I can't even get that phrase out. I can't even get Theodore Rex, the series, is going to clean up at the 2026 Emmys out. It's just stupid.
Well, that's the thing I want. I want some merch with a talking Theodore Rex doll that I can call Teddy Rexpin.
Fuck. Like, wait a few more years and those dinosaurs will probably show up in Disney merch because it'll have cycled around to be 30 years old or whatever. And it's like, it's time to put these back on the shelves. But there is one other thing that I want to talk about before we stop talking about Theodore Rex.
I've been praying the day would never come, but I suppose it must.
This is the third episode in a row we've talked about a 90s movie where talking dinosaurs live among modern humans. Because we're back a dinosaur story where someone both clones dinosaurs and then also feeds them cereal to make them smart and docile.
Yeah. I mean, I've said this in a few places, but this movie does really feel like it's the live action version of a cartoon that already existed, but that cartoon doesn't exist. And
it feels like the bad guy should have been voiced by Christopher Lloyd. Like that's the kind of production we're dealing with here.
It was like that. That's the thing is, I feel like it maybe couldn't have been so. The thing is, there's like certain parts of it that are kind of serious, and then certain parts that are just so campy and just so like horribly like overacted or like acting like it's on a kid show. It's weird. It's like it's one of those movies that doesn't really know like what its audience is really, whether it's straight up children or maybe like adults to a certain degree with coming in with their kids kind of thing. It's weird. It's a
It feels like somebody said kids love dinosaurs and we have this buddy cop script.
Yes.
What if we stunt cast the no nonsense detective and we put dinosaurs in for the other one? And
like the whole villain story seems kind of superfluous, right? Like the whole kind of hard to understand. I don't know.
Oh, it's dumb.
Yeah,
it's really dumb. And I kind of love that it's a thing because it's not a movie that would get made today.
No.
It's not even if you put aside the immense cost, like it's too weird to get made today. And that's a shame, but cinema being what it is, really the only thing that gets released are small films or huge hits.
Just like video games.
So like this movie's I mean there is a parallel here where a video game like this wouldn't get made today either. You will never get the Theodore Rex narrative adventure game that society demands.
You could completely make Theodore Rex detective adventures, though. I mean, I wonder who owns the rights to Theodore Rex.
There's a phrase someone has never said.
I think they've been vacated.
I mean, you must be able to acquire the
in
rights.
The Simpsons where he gets hired by Scorpio, and they're like, "How are we going to pay off the mortgage from the house or whatever?" And then they just stick the sign "abandoned" onto in front of it and bugger off to work on the West Coast or wherever they're going. It's that, I assume, with intellectual property.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can figure this out.
I mean, it was released by New Line, which I find hilarious.
Yeah, the house that Freddy built, and then later gave us the Lord of the Rings films.
Yes.
Yeah, it's so that means it's Warner Brother Discovery then.
Yep. So Max, forget FX, Max. It's going to be a Max 5-part.
Shit, we're going to have to put it on Max. It's going to get canceled and deleted.
I smell a gritty reboot.
Oh my god, a gritty reboot of Theodore Rex would be the worst, the best and the worst. It was the best of times, it was the blurst of times. Fuck it, let's go.
Oh yeah, maybe it did all ties it. That was one of the chimp ended up as one of the typewriters in Burns' room.
Oh, there! That explains everything. This is a really dumb conversation we're having, and I'm glad I was here for it. This also counts as my new business, and so we'll just go with that. Did I play any games this week? No, I didn't have a hand for most
I was thinking it might be a challenge. I don't know whether you play I'm trying to think maybe Sound Voyager for GBA or so. You still need to work the buttons on them a bit.
Yeah, so I have my arm back now. Like, I'm out of the splint. I still have to wear the sling sometimes because it's just not comfortable. If you split your arm for a week, guess what? It gets super tight. But hey, it is what it is. So, America and Theodore Rex, that's what I've got for you this week.
All right, well, with that hopefully well and truly behind us, we will now adjourn for a break. And when we come back, we will complete new business slate for the week and see perhaps about getting to some listener mail at the end of it, but I make no promises. Welcome back to the second part of the first segment of this show. Yes, that's the post-Theodore Rex segment, let us pray.
You don't know that.
Everything is, it's like, everything is post-Theodore Rex from this point on for Western civilization.
More specifically, this is actually the second part of John's new business, which is the actual bit that involves video games, I believe.
Right.
So, if you'd like to take us further along that road. John, please.
Yes. I'm going to wrap up Diablo IV. I've been playing that some more this week and kind of dug into a couple. It's funny because a couple of the things that I said I wasn't really interested in, I started playing. I rolled a seasonal character. Of course, I have, that's my third character is a seasonal character. And of course, when you roll a seasonal character, you can choose whether or not they're hardcore, which means you die once, your character is done, toast. I don't know what it does, but you can't use that character anymore. I think it actually deletes that character. It may auto delete it. I don't know. But anyways, you can't use it anymore. Or you can also choose to skip the campaign, which I don't usually do. I like playing through the campaign just because I find it's kind of an easy way to level a character, or at least kind of a structured way. I don't. Anything else is really, really grindy, which I'm not a huge fan of. But the seasonal stuff is kind of cool because it does. I did kind of confirm like really what you can do right now in the end game. I'm sure this will change when the expansion comes out, but really you can run the pit, which is like Greater Rifts in Diablo 3. And then you can they have like kind of like uber bosses, like the bosses that you fight throughout the campaign. You can fight bigger, badder versions of them, which of course require better armor. And then there's all the different ways you can tweak your armor and your gear. And there's certain events that are tied to farming materials to do all of this stuff in the end game. The seasonal stuff is pretty cool though, where similar kind of similar to Diablo 3, where the seasons, they had certain challenges that you could do. So if I recall in Diablo 3, you had maybe 7 different overall challenges that you could do in a certain season. Of course, that's a time-boxed period of time. I think this current season runs until August the 6th. So I still have a little time to do a few things here and there. But you have challenges that you can complete, and you can get stuff like, particular armor sets being dropped and stuff like that. Of course, a lot of cosmetic stuff. And so the way that they split up they have 3 different types of battle pass. A free battle pass, which you can just roll through it however you want, and it unlocks cosmetics along the way. And then they have a premier battle pass, like pretty much most of these live service games do. It looks like and then they have an accelerated battle pass where it just gives you 20 free tiers. So you're effectively buying tiers of, I don't know how many tiers there are, if there's like 100 tiers in the battle pass or something. I can't quite recall. I don't think, it probably isn't. It probably goes up to about 50. It doesn't feel like it's 100. But it looks like really, the normal battle pass versus the premier battle pass is very similar to Diablo Immortal, where you're unlocking stuff along the way, but it's just if you get the premier battle pass, there's just another tier of stuff that you unlock along the way. So if you go up to level 20, you might unlock 5 pieces of cosmetic gear. Well, if you have the premier battle pass, you would get 10 pieces of cosmetic gear and then a whole bunch of other kind of stuff that you would use for materials and stuff like that. So it doesn't seem too crazy to me. It gives you a little something to work through. But I mean, really, it's more about kind of rolling a new character. So I rolled a barbarian, and I'm going through the campaign right now. Really liking that character. Always wanted to roll one, so I was curious about the seasonal stuff, and I was like, oh well, let's just roll this character and take him through the seasonal content. And because I guess what happens at the end of the season is that character just moves to your normal roster of characters, so that character doesn't go away. So yeah, Barbarian's pretty cool. Also, switched up the build on my Sorcerer, which is cool. Didn't like the one I was running, so I have a pretty cool fire build right now that I'm running on my Sorcerer. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. I'll just keep rolling through the seasonal stuff from here on out. Probably finish the campaign on the Sorcerer. Yeah, so it's going to be one of those games that I play in the background. I'm very curious to see what happens with the expansion. But overall, yeah, I'm glad I took the time to actually dig back into it and play through it, because it is worthwhile. I'll be very curious to see if they bring this out on Switch 2. I feel like it could probably be done on Switch 2, depending on the power of the device. Usually, I think the only thing that would take a hit here, if they can put Diablo 3 on the original Switch, I think they could put Diablo 4 on Switch 2. I would think, with certain downgrades, of course. But the game isn't such a graphical powerhouse. It looks great, but with all of these Diablo games, there's kind of a certain ceiling on what the game is going to look like, just because of its camera angle, and it's the fact that the camera is fixed, relatively speaking. And a lot of the characters, they aren't really detailed. It depends. I think even the cutscenes are in engine, so that's really, really detailed stuff. But I just feel like there's some stuff they could work around, because the characters aren't really zoomed in on very often, so they could probably get away with some tricks there on Switch 2. But I mean, I have this. This is, again, just like Diablo 3. It's a game I buy on every platform just so that I have it. Because the cool thing is, like, your Battle.net account, it carries across every platform. So you're logging in with your Battle.net account everywhere, and it tracks all of your achievements. Most of them.
So you're saying installations of various Diablo games are shelf stable for the apocalypse?
Yes, they absolutely
you're
are.
Just hoarding them in your bunker.
Yep, I would throw them in there aside with right alongside Campbell's soup, stuff like that.
There we go.
So yeah, so it's good. It's good. I would say anybody that likes a grind fest kind of thing like that, but also likes to tinker with builds, then Diablo 4 is really, really good for that. That's that.
Yeah, very good, John. Well, for myself, I can't say there's been that much gaming going on in the past week. I've continued to make this sort of incremental progress, go through the single player campaign of Perfect Dark on the expansion pack. I think there's an element of some sort of nostalgia, I think, because I remember when I got the game originally back in 2000, it was in June, the summer. There's European soccer championships going on in 2000, so there's some sort of replication there. But also, we were talking before we started, the retroactive was in June back in 2011, we think. So that apparently, obviously we're into July now, but that is Joanna month. it's just fate that we're going to go back to it at that time. But yeah, not terribly much to say. Those retroactive conversations exist. They're on the feed. You could go back there for more kind of a full account of, we had dedicated episodes for, kind of the campaign, and then also the kind of multiplayer experience, which certainly, especially when we got to the school holidays in 2000, I ended up playing a lot of it with friends, at that time. It was great fun. But the single player stuff, you've got a lot of the same issues as you did have, with GoldenEye, for as many sort of things that they upgraded and so forth. You still have these issues of like, okay, you got these mission objectives and so forth, which make the game, made it stand out. It was from the various, kind of Doom clones, as, we already talked about in the previous segment, that was a lot of what first person shooters had been, to the point that GoldenEye came out. And so that helped it kind of distinguish itself and whatnot. But they kind of mostly kept a lot of that stuff intact with Perfect Dark, and obviously, especially in retrospect for either of those games, there's some issues with that, that feel a bit kind of archaic, in the sense that you have sometimes the missions can end up being quite prolonged, especially like if somebody goes the first time through, they didn't eat. I mean, I've got a little bit of a recollection of some of these things that come back to me as I start playing them. But, for people truly going through the first time, kind of finding things, figuring things out or whatever. And it has like kind of gotcha moments, where it's like, oh, well, there's this thing that's mission critical, but if you just kind of do probably what a lot of people are going to do, it'll end up like getting blown up. And then the mission's over. So, it's just, you can't, proceed from that point, but you still have to like go to the menu to abort, like manually. There's some strange things with that. So that's where I guess, you kind of feel like, it's a little bit surprising, just building on the experience that they had with GoldenEye, that they didn't say, okay, here's like some checkpoints. After, you have mission objectives, right? So it's like, oh, well, once you clear a mission objective, that becomes a checkpoint. And then it could be like, okay, if something happens, as I described, where, you die, or something you were supposed to do gets screwed up and you're blown up, whatever, and you can't do it anymore, it would be the option of like, do you want to retry from the beginning, or do you want to retry from where you achieved the first or second, whatever, and so on, mission objective? But no such feature is present in the game. But of course, with this being on Switch Online, the expansion pack, you do have the option, to kind of just make a save state at a particular point. So again, that I think will help the experience, especially as it goes on, because I feel I have some recollection that you kind of get more, I've run into a few such examples already. Like there's this crate, in one of the levels where, you kind of using it for cover at first, like it's this hover crate, and I'm using it for cover and I don't really know anything about it. And then all of a sudden it just blows up and it's like, oh, that was mission critical. It's like, it's just a crate. And I think you can even, I think it's that you're meant to blow up like a wall with it, but it's not even the only way you have to blow up that wall. I think you could, because you can use the rifles that have a proximity mine secondary function, which is one of the new things for Perfect Dark, is weapons having secondary functions, and just blow it up that way. So it's weird that it sort of tells you that you failed the mission when there are other ways to do that. So yeah, it's, it's been a bit of a nostalgic experience and somewhat enjoyable. And I've mostly just been playing it, the way I would have played it back in the day, which is you're not really trying to set up a control scheme that it can be done, that more approximates how we play first person shooters today, but rather, kind of just play as I did back then, steering myself around with the analog stick and then letting the auto aim do most of the work. And probably if I was playing more on Perfect Agent or, that kind of thing, or trying to do like very competitive multiplayer or something, like you might run up against the limits of that approach much more quickly. But it's okay. It balances out all right for the I think it's Special Agent. Yeah, that, the mid difficulty tier is. And so, yeah, it's been, an enjoyable thing to, keep working through. We'll see how far it goes because, I think I did end up doing most of GoldenEye's campaign, but not all of it because at least bloody hell, that, the Seven-Eye bunker on the middle difficulty in that case. Oof, that's, the guards just keep coming once you get spotted. It's just an endless parade of them.
There is something about these Bond games and by extension Perfect Dark, and it actually continues into the GameCube games where they were clearly very much trying to pattern, like Nightfire, where they're like, okay, let's just copy what Rare did as best we can. Where the infinite spawning guards is a very funny thing to a certain degree, because it could just, the AI is not smart. And you could just sit there and shoot. And it's not a successful tactic. But there is this feeling of like, well, eventually Joanne is just going to completely depopulate Datadyne, right? Like, there won't be any employees left. Like, how many employees can they possibly be carrying on their current employee roles?
It doesn't really feel like that's what it's supposed to balance out. You got to feel like, all right, no. if you're constructing this stealth scenario, it's kind of like, well, really, if you get to the point where your cover is entirely blown and you can't kind of contain it, and there's just this, ongoing pouring in of personnel, you're cooked, right? It's essentially a fail state, but instead it's like, no, this is weirdly sustainable. They keep bringing me ammo, and it just becomes this mass slaughter, but you're not really achieving anything. I don't imagine
it's World War One. Yes,
exactly. Yes. That's not generally the sort of escapist fare that we look for in video game scenarios so terribly often.
Yeah, there's a reason there's not a lot of World War One video games,
especially in games that also contain, Sean Connery impersonators, an alien called Elvis, and various other things.
I feel like that makes make 1917 a lot more enjoyable.
Yeah, well, that's what it was missing, surely. Yeah, so like I say, I'll probably keep plodding along with that for a while. But we did also have NSO basic tier NSO getting a number of updates, which included some more rare games. We keep expecting there to be more, since clearly they've kind of done a deal there to get some of this stuff on NSO, and I imagine there's a fair few more to come, including on N64. I mean, we did mention in response to the Direct, that it was a little bit kind of like, okay, we could understand the additions because it tied into like something that was going on at the time. So, we had like Zelda 4 Swords for Echoes of Wisdom, and we had Metroid Zero Mission for Prime 4, and even with Perfect Dark, you had the reboot getting shown off by Microsoft. And then it was like, well, what was Durock doing there? And of course, the obvious thing to have would have been a DK game, because DKC Returns was announced as a new game at the Direct, a new port for Switch for early 2025. And, could have had DK64, could have had perhaps DK King of Swing for GBA, that's another possibility for a DK game that was, but what they were really waiting for was the truly just so obvious, staring you right in the face, but you can't see it. Donkey Kong Jr. Math, which has finally arrived.
God damn it.
Finally. I mean, Jesus, I was wondering when they were going to bring it in.
So
John's finally going to know what 2 + 2 is.
Finally, I can learn.
No, to be fair, as I said, you've got a couple of rare games here that were certainly very well reviewed, very well thought of over here. Reading. I had Cobra Triangle. I did not have Solar Jetman, which is the other rare game from that sort of the end of the 80s. But they're both famously very difficult, right? It's very much like the overhang of their kind of design philosophy on the computers. But like I said, they were very well thought of, and I had Cobra Triangle, but we got it pretty late. It was around about the time our NES started to get less and less reliable for booting it up. And eventually it was just, you couldn't really count on it to start up successfully at all. And that's when we, moved to try and save up for getting a Super Famicom. So I mean, that and the fact that Cobra Triangle is famously difficult, I don't think I ever finished it, but I messed around with it a bit on Rare Replay, and, it's here as well. But the other thing that, apart from those rare games, is basically backfilling like the black box games. So, yeah, I guess we talked about it when they launched the service, the Switch Online subscription. Was that 5.5 years ago or something? It's quite a while.
Something like that, yeah.
And it's like, it's a lot of black box games, but it wasn't all of them. And then 5.5 years later, we have, I think, filled in most of the gaps here with something like, you did have to wonder whether some of these would ever feature. First of all, just because it had been so long since the service started, and it kind of seemed like they might be the things that would either be early or perhaps not at all. But also that feeling that in some cases, like, well, is it kind of redundant when you have, for instance, like, they've got the original Golf there. Whereas like NES Open Tournament Golf, which is, expanded and improved in pretty much every way. And I mean, it kind of should do, because I think it was like 8 years later or something. You might think they wouldn't bother putting that original golf game back, but they did. And I mean, it's a kind of somewhat important game, in terms of, codifying that whole, timed pressing, button, with the swing mechanic and everything for a lot of golf games that would follow, and just something to have as part of a launch lineup when it came out in America and stuff. But and we had it. That was a game we had back when I was a kid, so it's kind of funny to see it back there and stuff. But interesting timing, that coming along with other black box games were Mac Rider, the aforementioned Donkey Kong Jr. Math. But then also, I think, one of the more interesting ones as a sort of, little bit of catch up with, something from the Japanese app that happens every now and again. We've got Atlantis no Nazo. Which is like semi-infamous, really, basically, isn't it? It's just like, okay, it's this game in Japan that was just really trying to kind of answer Super Mario Brothers by having more levels. But other than that, it's apparently a bit of a mess, and it includes some kind of unwinnable fail states or whatever. You got to get trapped in a room or something.
I have poked at this and found it inscrutable. So, hey, if you have the Japanese Nintendo Switch Online, go for it.
Well,
that's
the thing. You don't need the Japanese one now. That has they felt that's been true for a while, that it was up on the Japanese app, but not on the English language.
This one can. Oh, I missed that.
Yeah, this is actually part of, because it is a weird grab bag. It's quite a big update, like I said, and it's a weird grab bag of things. You've got these relatively advanced.
God.
Later NES games from Rare, you've got Nintendo black box stuff, and then you've got this sort of import game in the case of Atlantis no Nazo. So yeah, just a really interesting sort of collection of games. Of course, also Urban Champion. Now, this has been, pretty infamous and a bit of a whipping boy, and I've never owned it or had access to it before, so I'll finally be able to have an informed opinion the next time that it is the butt of a joke.
The next time we get an email where someone complains about us talking about Urban Champion when we hadn't talked about Urban Champion in 2 years.
Yeah.
And so we all collectively agreed to buy Urban Champion despite one specific listener.
I wasn't around.
The thing is, I picture Greg at a cocktail party, and he's sitting there in a tuxedo.
Okay.
And he overhears somebody saying, I was playing Urban Champion the other day. I'm sorry, I've never played it. Well, I've never played it either. Oh, excuse me, sir. I have an informed opinion on Urban Champion.
It's important. It's important. In today's world, everyone is so quick to offer an opinion on things which, they may or may not know a great deal about. I don't want to be one of those people. I don't want to just say, you know what, it looks really shit, admittedly, but I haven't played it.
Greg, let me inform your opinion. It also plays really shit.
Your opinion, the thing is, his opinion it'll take maybe about 5 minutes to form his opinion.
That's the thing. Well,
I don't think it's going to take that long.
That was going to be the punchline, though, is it's like, well, more accurately, I have the option to have an informed opinion. Now, whether I will exercise that option is, we'll see. May happen, may not.
The greatest thing Urban Champion has ever done is gave us one opportunity to dunk on one listener.
Convince the world that doesn't exist? Is that what you're going to say?
No. The one opportunity it gave us to dunk on a single listener who's like, people talk about shit like Urban Champion, and then we're all going to go, oh, well, I just happened to play 3D Classics Urban Champion this week. Well, me too. Because we had gotten this email. We were all very confused because none of us had talked about that fucking game. And we're like, well, I guess we should all talk about that game now just to fuck this guy in particular. The show is a lot more petty around 500. I think this is actually like 385. We're too old to be petty now.
Yeah. Just
petty with each other. But we also don't get emails like that anymore where someone just accuses us of talking about games because there's a lot more Nintendo podcasts now. If you find us insufferable, there's another one out there for you, I'm sure. Back when we were doing that was the Wii U era. Nobody was Nintendo podcasting. We were the brave people stepping out into the abyss and documenting the nothing around us. Thank you, Urban Champion, for being part of that nothingness.
We did. I'm sure we'd mentioned it at a certain point. Just say, well, doesn't the fact that it was absent, it did kind of suggest they weren't terribly proud of it, and yet, they by gum, they've gone and added it in there. I'm especially say many times with these subscription services, it kind of you'd like to have some kind of upsides to the fact that you definitely don't have even the most tenuous ownership of any of this content, right? Like at least it should also kind of give you the option to play stuff that you otherwise wouldn't. I already mentioned like running through Game Boy Mega Man 2 kind of as part of that, because again, I was never going to buy that, but I still kind of wanted to see why it was singled out for such complete derision among those Game Boy Mega Man games, and how much I could enjoy something, that is relatively sort of shoddy in that area. So, I'm pleased that they've gone back and actually filled in some of these blanks again, could give anybody who's interested the more full range of what was on offer when they, brought out those early games, in that, as it is referred to, the black box era. But I've got to say, when I was a kid, that we had this kind of book, it was like something I think maybe it came with a special edition of a magazine, which was like a buyer's guide. I'm sure there were analogous things in America and Canada around this time, containing a bunch of like condensed reviews from the magazine in question, covering I'm sure it wasn't comprehensive, but the whole a whole range of games, not just like from recent years, but going further back for the different platforms that were available, in Britain at the time, right? So I could kind of look back at like, okay, well, here's all the NES games that we hadn't really had the opportunity to kind of play because, as I said, it broke down, and eventually, we just decided to move on. And that was where I came across the existence of Donkey Kong Jr. Math. And it did, as a child, it seemed like the most intensely unappealing thing I could imagine. It was, I mean, I think the review of it was absolutely scathing, but so that probably influenced this, but also it's just like, it was like, essentially, this is the antithesis of what a video game is meant to be to me. It's like, a video game is very much opposed to education. It's like, education is not fun, video games are meant to be fun, therefore these things are mutually exclusive. How dare you?
Oh my God.
That was the workings of my 5-6-year-old brain.
The funny thing is, like, there was a company, Minnesota Electronic something, MECC, that was producing, like, edutainment games at this point that were often distributed in schools on PCs that existed in the North American market space, but probably didn't exist in Europe, because we talked about this, like the home computer era, the microcomputer era in the 80s and early 90s was fucking insane, where it's like we had regional computers. But they were all bad, and yet they were all way better than this shit. They're all so much better than Donkey Kong Jr. Math. Oh, I played DK Jr. Math as a child because, again, we've talked about it. My NES collection is a fucking nightmare. Did I have any of the good Donkey? No. I had DK Jr. Math. And it sucks. Like, it's such a weird bolt-on. Like, who's like, what if we take the DK gameplay? Huh? It put fucking...
How does it play? I've never even investigated.
Exactly like you would expect.
Is it like you solve a math problem,
yes,
and you move up a little bit further?
No, you solve a math problem by controlling like DK Jr.
Oh boy.
So like you're in a stage and there's like math that you can solve with the DK Jr. It's very dumb.
Wow, okay.
Also, I found the email. 24 minutes.
Oh no. Well, I'm glad. I see you are true to your promise that we're not petty anymore.
24 minutes of Donkey Kong bongo bullshit is 23 too many. Nobody gives a fuck. Please talk about Urban Champion for 24 minutes next time. It's just as relevant. Get it? Donkey wrong. So the very first person to respond to this email is Guillaume, of all people, who notes, "This is the same dude who sent me an angry email because I said the first Double Dragon wasn't on VC." This then rolls for a while, and then John jumps in and goes, "We should totally fucking talk about Urban Champion now."
Yeah, absolutely.
Like,
that's what
at
I'm
which
saying,
point
though.
we're now all just planning this thing, and then we're trying to debate if we should read the email or just completely not mention it. And eventually, Johnny Rids, actually the funniest way to do it would be to read his email in the next LM segment. But rather than directly responding, one of us says, "Hey, I've actually been playing that." Then everyone else jumps in too.
Yep.
And talk about it as long as possible, which is probably 5 minutes max.
Yeah.
It's of all the, those sorts of heroic filibusters in political history, none were so skillful or so strenuous as trying to talk about the champion.
The champion for 6 minutes. The funny thing was, at that exact moment, as Guillaume pointed out, it just happened to be the Club Nintendo reward game because Nintendo has a sick sense of humor.
Yeah.
And so we all end up with it. And this email goes for a while. There's a bunch of responses. John notes that he picked it up last night and even paid $5 out of spite. Johnny confirms that we are, in fact, the worst.
Yep.
And then Neil, who was used to be reading the RFN thread, jumps in out of nowhere and says, "I'm just checking every new reply in this because it makes me so happy." I'm over here advocating for a stopwatch so we go exactly 24 minutes, but nobody was game for that.
Urban Champion's a polarizing topic.
Again, you can make up your own mind, listeners. You don't have to, just trust the tsunami of derision that is being overwhelmed with here.
I like that the guy wasn't even making fun. Like, History had told me he was making fun of Urban Champion, but no, he was mad that we talked about 24 minutes of Donkey Kong's Bongo bullshit.
I can't even remember which of the Donkey Kong Bongo related games that would have been. Because, although I would imagine equating any of them with Urban Champion is quite uncharitable. But if it's like Jungle Beat, like that's it
was Jungle Beat.
That's a, you know, really cool. It's slight, you know, and it's repetitive in certain aspects, particularly the bosses. But, you know, that is a creative, fun game from a lot of the developers who ended up making Mario Galaxy. You know, to equate that with Urban Champion is, you know, again, it's all from different points of view, but it doesn't. I don't think it's one that many will share.
I think it was tied to when I bought it when I was prepping for this was the pre-summer of Too Hot for Games. This was when I was still like hadn't like weaponized the format.
Well, I will say this as well. Some of these black box games do feel like they could be sort of summed up as in a collection of Too Cold for NES World Championships, because like that isn't. I assume that's not a coincidence, right? Like the fact that the NES World Championship game is the Nintendo World Championship NES Edition, to give it its proper name, I believe, is going to be with us in a couple of weeks or so. And, you know, like obviously that's got a lot of, you know, those kind of core NES games that are on NSO. But these are like the sort of the things that didn't make the cut almost, but they're like, okay, well, we'll put them on NSO to just beforehand so that if anybody for some reason buys Nintendo World Championships and it's like, where's Mac Rider or where's Urban Champion? And
Mac Rider.
And then decide, oh wait, I don't have an NSO subscription yet, but they've put it on there, so I should go on that. Like, I don't know. It's the time in there. I feel like it doesn't really make sense, but it can't be a coincidence either, right? I mean, surely.
No, I mean, it does feel like somebody was looking around the black box game and said, "Oh shit, we missed some of these. Well, I guess we better release them." I don't understand, like, if it really was like, oh shit, we forgot to release 2 of the black box games and one of them is Donkey Kong Jr. Math. If I was in the room, my response would be, good. Why? What's the point? I mean, I guess that's why we got so many at the same time, though. Like, imagine if there was only 3 and one of them was Donkey Kong Jr. Math.
No, that's it. If you're gonna do this kind of stuff, you do kind of feel like you gotta put bundle it up. The good old days of toxic loans, right? You gotta bundle it up. But the thing is, we've seen little bit similar things before, like when they bundled those weird those games together for like Halloween with like Castlevania Legends and Devil World and stuff. But I think that's Murasamacho was the other one, which again that was probably the most like legit game in that particular line. The Devil World's fine for what it is. I mean, it's not great, but it's
not much.
It's a perfectly cromulent, Pac-Man knockoff kind of scenario, isn't it? Basically, but
it's a weird clone of a different game.
It's also like what a lot of those things fell into, where it's like, okay, you take Pac-Man, you think, well, what can we add to it to make ours stand out? And generally, adding anything to it diminishes it, because it was really excellent the way it was, and anything you kind of tack onto it ends up feeling like frippery, kind of thing. So you kind of fell into that trap. But yeah, definitely, like, yeah, if you're going to add these two in, you kind of needed to have them piggyback off some other stuff, and in this case the other stuff was mostly the rare games, I think, which would be is part of like kind of presumably a trend that we're going to see. Like, so there's quite a few more across the various formats that I would still expect to see for a while yet, as part of that kind of deal that they've done, clearly. And then also you've got the Atlantis no Nazo as well, as a sort of curiosity piece. Again, something that's kind of, I think people, retro game enthusiasts may well have heard the name and its sort of place in the history of when Famicom games, so many sold extraordinarily well, even if, if they weren't that great. But, that's, something that people might check out on a whim kind of thing.
So Japan didn't get the Rare games.
No, that's a sort of pretty well established pattern. Although they did get Perfect Dark, to be fair, under its Japanese name Red and Black.
Yeah, I mean they pushed that game pretty hard in Japan when it came out. So I guess that makes sense. It has but Cobra Triangle and Solar Jetman are such consoleized ZX Spectrum-ass games that I don't think Japan has any context for games like that. I mean,
I wonder if they're seen as exotic kind of thing, ooh, because over here we say something ooh,
bad.
This was never released outside of Japan. Even these bad games though from Japan that were never released over here, we find them fascinating. So I'm sure in Japan they find those games absolutely fascinating, even though they're not good. I'm telling you, man.
I mean, Cobra Triangle was pretty interesting. I played that as a kid. I think it has some merit. The difficulty of it might be off-putting, and it's it's a bit of a grab bag of things, right? Because it feels like it's a continuation of RC Pro-Am to a degree, right? In terms of the perspective, presumably some of how they kind of got it to work is similar. Yeah. But you're opening it up to making it more of an action game, right? It's got a sort of veneer of the first mission is a race to a finish or whatever, but really is you're shooting stuff, you're kind of doing almost platform challenges, going off ramps and, evade these various scenarios. But that's the thing, it's kind of this grab bag of scenarios where I don't know whether any of them necessarily kind of get fully fleshed out or iterated on. I'd have to play it more as an adult to make a more critical evaluation, but it's got some, it's quite interesting and it's quite sort of, unusual, for an NES game of that period to kind of try some of the things that it's trying. Meanwhile, being really, really quite difficult. Solar Jetman, like I said, not as familiar with that one, messed around with it a little bit on Rare Replay, and that is very famous for being just really, really tough.
Yeah, and these are very European. So if you are familiar with what European games felt like at that time, they do feel that way. Which if you're not, it's a weird feeling. Even as a North American gamer, it's what the fuck?
Yeah,
what the fuck is this? But yeah, they are both. They are both harder than I think their developers intended them to be, if that makes sense.
Well, there's the old thing about, and this is not something that would have only been said about Rare back then, but maybe a number of developers back then, where it's just the kind of breadth of playtesting may not really have been in effect, it's just you've got kind of a closed group of people that, maybe in some cases you've got the problem of just you've been playing this game, for a long time, all through all the phases of development, and you kind of might get inured to some of its difficulties or problems. But beyond that, it might be just well, no, you just play a lot of games of this type, right? And have done for years, and you're not seeing it from the perspective of just again, especially as these were, console games, and maybe people who were going to be playing them might not have had a history, as I certainly didn't. I didn't play any Spectrum games or whatever. So when I played Cobra Triangle, or if I had played Solar Jetman, which I might have done because it reviewed very well, if our NES hadn't broken so quickly that it would have been on the table, I wouldn't have been coming to that as a, 6-year-old or whatever with any kind of built up knowledge of how, the Spectrum games would have prepared me for this. But maybe, the playtesters that they had, that was what they were, kind of used to. And it kind of obscures the ways in which it might be off-putting to people that don't have that context to put it in. And therefore, they kind of, in that sense, misperceive how difficult they're making it. And also, there was just more of a thing in those days, it kind of felt like, and I think especially in the sort of hobbyist community of just the object of the game for the people making it was almost to stump people, right? It wasn't like to entertain them. It was to challenge them. Like, I bet you can't beat this, which, is much more of a thing that comes out of a kind of community driven scene, like I said, a hobbyist kind of thing, rather than just a corporate kind of thing of like, well, we want to make money, but eventually in, other phases, you got this weird thing of corporate diktats being in favor of making things harder because of the rental market in the US.
Yeah.
But that's a whole other thing.
So instead, Japan gets Mahjong, which should surprise no one. That is the black box equivalent of what you get on an NES in Japan.
But again, really surprising that very much is a Japanese equivalent of like, well, you might have thought that'd be day one or bust for NSO, right. But no, here we are all these years later.
They got Go, which I can't imagine how bad. Like, Go as a concept, against a computer, has really only flourished in the last 5 or 6 years. It's way harder than chess. I can't imagine how brain-dead stupid NES Go must be. It must be the dumbest AI opponent. And then they got Shin Onigashima, which is this, like, really strange, like, text adventure game that came out on the disk system from R&D 4 of all places, which is like a really weird division of Nintendo at that particular period of time. This is a game that is completely unlocalizable.
Sure, yeah. That probably is not going to get the Atlantis NASO treatment of like just letting us have an because there's quite a few of them, right? Like Joy Mech Fight and the Pan of the Pon on the Super Nintendo one, like where they're just like, there's Japanese text, Mario Super Picross, like but you could deal with it, you can have it. But the Kirby puzzle game, the Star Kids or whatever, it's Sparkling something, I forget exactly, the Tetris-ish, so you drop falling block puzzle type of thing, where it can work. But that I cannot imagine that would ever be given that treatment.
Yeah, this is a very weird one. I'm gonna read a note from the Wikipedia on reception though, because it's very funny. This is an adventure game / text adventure. Like there are some graphics. Quote, the game's difficulty is rather high as very few hints are given in solving the mysteries, and many circumstances can lead to the game over screen. Even so, the game's warm graphics and plot consisting of interwoven Japanese fairy tales are positively received. This is an adventure game, and I've read this in more detail somewhere else. This is an adventure game that basically gives you no hints on how to solve the puzzle. Or in some cases, even what the puzzle is. Truly, this is the game that absolutely the Switch Online serves.
Yeah, this sounds like something out of the early 80s even. Like, it sounds like an early PC adventure game.
Well, I guess that's the thing. I mean, it was on, like you said, it was on disk system, so it wouldn't have been terribly early for Japan.
It's 87.
Because the Famicom launches in 83, but the disk system doesn't come along until 86.
And they sold the two discs separately.
But
because
I think one of the things that the disk system brought along with it was this idea of, people would then maybe bring not necessarily like direct ports, but like the kind of experiences that people have been having on computers in Japan would then come over to this system. So even if it's not literally the product of the early 80s, maybe it is in spirit,
very much. Yeah. I mean, in the early 80s, you had adventure games where if you couldn't figure them out, you're screwed. You're not going any further in that game.
And you can't, because we made no effort to make them possible to figure out.
Right. But I mean, even there's, I can think of adventure games even from the early 80s where, Infocom text adventures and other stuff like that, where there's no internet. There's nowhere can look for hints.
We talked about it with the Seventh Guest. Like, that's much later, but there's there's puzzles in there that are basically unsolvable, and you just have to brute force them.
Yep.
But there might have been in Japan a more of a culture of sharing tips and tricks and stuff like that, because I know that like Tower of Druaga was an arcade hit, and there was literally like people would leave like a little booklet that players would just like fill up with hints for the next person who would start playing it, and like that was a thing in arcades.
Yep.
You know,
but that's the thing. Arcades can have a sort of communal aspect to them. I guess,
game you take home.
With this sort of thing, you're relying on that kind of playground, kind of sharing of secrets, perhaps. But it's certainly,
I would guess,
with something that could work. But I mean, I imagine something like Famicom Detective Club would have been around about the same time. And
yes.
I mean, would that have had more robust kind of accounting for maybe helping players along if they got I'm sure not nearly as comprehensive or helpful as what you'd get in the genre generations later. But did that have more to it to help players along?
When I played Famicom Detective Club, and again, granted, this is the polished up version of it. This is the third time they've revised that game, because they revised it for the Super Nintendo as well, or the Super Famicom. It felt very much like it did a good job of at least guiding you broadly where you need to go. Now, granted, did they fix some of that? Maybe, but I seem to recall that it's pretty faithful to the original content, if that makes sense. So, this game came out before that one as well, so maybe they learned some lessons.
Sure, yeah. But
this is a weird collection of games regardless of what region you're in.
Sure, yeah. Again, you wonder if it's kind of something that game maybe like Atlantis No Nazar, even though that's not new to Japan, but they put it on the Japanese service some time ago, is another one of these things that just has a particular place, in that kind of, in the history of the Japanese market where, people who were around back then, it was a relatively famous game, and so it's just like, hey, regardless of whether it was famous / infamous, whether, it kind of had some of the recognition for entirely good reasons. It's like that's a name that people kind of remember, and we can get we can put it on there. So that's what we're going to do. It could fall into that category. I mean, I think, with this update, they've plugged some of the holes now, and really, I'm trying to think, like, the most obvious one I can think of first party wise now would probably be Star Tropics 2. I think, other than that, like, there's, obviously you got special case stuff like light gun games, right? Duck Hunt and Hogan's Alley and so forth. And probably a few other, peripherals, especially like for other systems like, I don't know, the Super Nintendo Mouse and Mario Paint and Mario Wario. Goodness knows what else. But, certainly, that Star Tropics, because the Star Tropics is there, but not the sequel for whatever, which was a late NES game, to say the least.
I'm looking at the list of NES games that Nintendo published, and like there's still some outliers, but I feel like it's just going to get weirder. Like if they do another, like it's entirely possible this is the last Switch round, because it's not like they've been releasing NES games at a high rate of speed lately. Like
the NES stuff was front loaded, right? Because that's what was there at first, and then like obviously like Super Nintendo, it comes along. Game Boy has come along, right? And you would think Game Boy is probably going to have more of the the additions to be made with that going forward than with NES. You've hit a lot of the areas that you'd expect them to hit on that part of the service. So I don't think we take for granted just how many more of these types of updates you might get for NES until maybe there's some sort of refresh of the service, or different platforms added again on another when we get to the Switch successor, which could then put the old platforms more on the back burner. I mean, we don't know any of that stuff yet. Obviously they haven't shared that, so it's a fair point, in the sense that could it be kind of just putting something on the kind of right side of the ledger before everything is going to be subject to some sort of refresh. we'll see. But I'm still, however little time or sustained time we get it with some of these, I'm still pleased to see them because, like I said, it's just like that's one of the perks of this model versus, some of the drawbacks of it is, just have that option to play games that otherwise you would not be particularly motivated to, pay for a la carte.
I do like the idea that the last game the service ever gets is Donkey Kong Jr. Math, though. Like, there's something
that is, not in the parlance of the time, but certainly more recently, that would be some sort of mic drop, wouldn't it?
It's deeply messed up.
Yep. Well, I think it's Nintendo sort of saying, "Look, we've sold so many Switches, just do the math." And then like rolling out with like they're wearing like a mink coat, sort of like Conor McGregor style. Like that's Nintendo just walking out of the room.
The arm swaying with McGregor style.
The Vince McMahon walk like out of the room. Like
God,
that's it.
Who
right
was
there.
it? What was the boxer that walked out in like the super heavy outfit and tired themselves out? I'm trying to remember who that was.
Was that
Yeah,
Wilder?
Well, that seems
Wilder,
like
because the bronze
that
bomber,
seems like
right?
the
That
dumb
was his
shit
whole
Deontay Wilder would do.
That was his whole persona. So it's just kind of like, he went a bit too far with the ostentatious stuff, and then apparently, actually materially affected his ability to box. But I think that is going to have to do it for this week. We'll have to hold over.
You don't want to talk about Theater X again?
No. I mean, look, it'd be naive for me to suggest that it won't come up again. I mean, these things generally do, don't they? Once they take a
Theater X walks so that Horace Showpony could conduct the cult. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. It's become a sort of semi-recurring character now, and he might go quite a while without it coming back. And then you think you're safe, or you've almost forgotten it was everything, and then one day the bad penny will turn up once more. But fittingly enough, my closing music pick this week is from one of the aforementioned Rare NES games, because not just are they, Rare NES games in general, but they both have soundtracks by David Wise, who would go on, of course, to do the Donkey Kong Country soundtracks, and indeed came back and worked on Tropical Freeze as well for Wii U, and then latterly for the Switch. And of course, that's the thing. I mean, if you, especially thinking about DKC, this guy knows how to deliver a quality last boss theme. And so I have gone with the one from Solar Jetman, which is very, I don't know whether I'd quite put it up there with like, the first two DKC last boss themes, but it's, very, very, very good. And certainly, this will probably be the closest I will get to be able to experience the last boss of Solar Jetman, because, based on my sort of tinkering with it on Rare Replay and its formidable reputation, I think, any amount of save state rewind, business is probably not going to get me there, but the music's pretty damn good. So, Until next week, bye-bye, everybody.
Later.
Bye.
Bye.